Elliot Harper, a struggling actor, falls for the famous movie star Luca Sinclair in a whirlwind romance that shatters the boundaries of love and fame. Together they must navigate a treacherous path filled with public scrutiny, family conflicts, and the dangers of hidden relationships. Will they choose each other, or sacrifice their love to survive in a world that won't let them be? Part 1. A Waking Love. The world of entertainment is a dazzling dream for many, but for Elliot Harper, it's nothing more than a constant, quiet struggle. He lives in the shadows of famous stars, invisible to the world, clinging desperately to the edge of his fleeting opportunities. One night, however, a simple mistake changes everything. Elliot Harper wasn't supposed to be here, at this event, in this glitzy world. He was just another background actor, the third or fourth guy who would never get the girl. His face was only seen in fleeting moments on the screen, and even then, it was usually lost among the crowd of more talented, more charismatic stars. But Elliot had always known there was more to him than what the industry had given him. A passion burned within him that he refused to let go of. He'd been in this game long enough to know how things worked. The industry was a game of connections, of luck, of timing. But for someone like Elliot, timing was always a little off. He had talent, but not the right look. He had ambition, but no big-name agent to push him. Until one fateful evening when fate, or maybe just sheer coincidence, decided to intervene. The event was a film premiere, a night where stars like Luca Sinclair walked the red carpet, looking perfect in every way. Luca wasn't just a star, he was a superstar, the kind of actor whose name was whispered in every corner of the world. The tabloids loved him, the directors adored him, and the fans, they worshipped him. He was known for his rugged charm, his breathtaking performances, and his whirlwind relationships with other A-listers. But for all the glitter, there was something hollow about him. Behind those dazzling smiles and magazine covers, Luca Sinclair was a man searching for something he couldn't quite find. Elliot knew Luca only from afar. He had seen him on screen, heard the stories, and admired him from a distance. That night, at the premiere, Elliot was nothing more than a background presence, watching as Luca was the center of attention. But when their eyes met, even for a fleeting second, it felt like something else entirely. Luca's gaze wasn't warm or inviting. If anything, it was guarded. But Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Luca than the polished celebrity image. Something about Luca made Elliot want to know him, to understand the person hidden behind the famous facade. Later that evening, the world as Elliot knew it would change forever. It was just past midnight when Elliot's phone buzzed with a new notification. He had been asleep, drained from the event, but the vibrating buzz woke him. It was a message on his phone, a message from none other than Luca Sinclair. The text came in a string of half-coherent emotional lines. Elliot blinked at it in confusion. Was this a prank? He stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. The words didn't make sense at first, until he realized that Luca must have sent the message to him by mistake. Luca was clearly drunk, and the message felt raw, almost too personal. I've been so lonely for so long. I wonder if I'll ever find someone to truly love. Elliot's heart skipped a beat. This was a side of Luca Sinclair no one ever saw. He had always assumed the star was untouchable, surrounded by friends, lovers, and admirers. But the words in front of him painted a different picture. Was Luca really as lonely as he sounded? Without thinking, Elliot's fingers hovered over the screen. Should he reply? It felt wrong. But the truth was, Luca's vulnerability pulled at something deep inside him. For a brief moment, Elliot saw Luca as a person, not just an icon. Elliot's thumb moved hesitantly across the keyboard. His fingers typed a simple, polite response. Hey, I think you sent this to the wrong person, but it's okay. I hope you find what you're looking for. He quickly hit send, But the nagging thought lingered in his mind. He knew better than to get involved in something so risky, especially with someone like Luca Sinclair. But something about the message, about Luca's raw, unfiltered words, tugged at him in a way he couldn't explain. Minutes later, his phone buzzed again. Another message from Luca. "Sorry, I didn't mean to send that. But maybe I did. I don't know anymore. You probably don't care, but I feel like I'm always living a lie. Everything I do is for the cameras, for the people who expect me to be perfect. What if I don't want that anymore?" The vulnerability in Luca's words hit Elliot harder than he expected. It was like being invited into a world he never thought he would be allowed to see. Luca wasn't just a perfect actor, a flawless star. He was human. He was, in fact, just as lost and confused as Elliot sometimes felt. But then, just as quickly as the conversation had begun, everything spiraled out of control. The next morning, the headlines read, "Luca Sinclair's secret love life exposed." The story was everywhere, on TV, social media, and in the tabloids. The message that Luca had sent to Elliot, intended to be private and drunken, was now the subject of an elaborate and wildly inaccurate story about Luca's supposed secret romance. The media had twisted the facts, portraying it as a scandalous affair between Luca and an unknown lover. Elliot's name was mentioned only briefly in the articles, but that was enough. His life was suddenly no longer his own. The photos, the speculation, the wild rumors, they all took on a life of their own. It wasn't just Luca who was being scrutinized now. Elliot was dragged into the spotlight whether he liked it or not. The media storm was unforgiving. Elliot tried to keep his head down, avoiding the glare of the cameras and the invasive questions, but every time he left his apartment, he was bombarded by reporters. What did Luca Sinclair mean to him? Was he really having an affair with the star? What did Elliot think of the rumors? He couldn't escape it. The moment he had decided to respond to Luca's message, his quiet, lonely life was shattered. Luca, on the other hand, had a different reaction. At first he was frustrated and angry. How could someone take something so personal and turn it into a media circus? But as the storm raged on, a part of him realized something he hadn't expected. The message he had sent to Elliot wasn't just an accident. It was a cry for help. He had been craving someone, anyone who could see past his fame and understand the person behind the headlines. But now Elliot was in the middle of this mess. Luca felt guilty. He hadn't meant to drag Elliot into his world of chaos. One evening, Luca reached out again, this time with a more composed message. "I'm sorry for everything. I never meant for this to happen, but I'm not sure how to make it stop. Can we talk?" Elliot stared at the message, his heart pounding. He had known this would happen, that the connection he felt would only lead to complications. But despite everything, there was a pull, an undeniable desire to understand Luca more, to see if the person behind the fame could truly be the man he had glimpsed through those brief, raw messages. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. Elliot hit reply, his fingers trembling as he typed, "I don't know where this is going, but I'm willing to listen." And just like that, the door to an uncertain but thrilling chapter of his life opened. Part 2. Love in the Shadows. If anyone had told Elliot Harper that his quiet life as a background actor would lead him to a battle against the very forces that had kept him invisible for so long, he would have laughed. But as he sat on the edge of his bed that night, staring at the glowing screen of his phone, he realized just how far things had already spiraled. Luca Sinclair, the Luca Sinclair, was now more than a distant star to him. He was someone Elliot couldn't just forget. But as much as Elliot wanted to give in to the warmth of Luca's presence, the truth was inescapable. Their love couldn't be public. Luca and Elliot had shared countless private moments, stolen glances and words that felt too important to be whispered behind closed doors. They were connected in a way neither of them had expected, but there was one massive barrier standing in their way: the world they lived in. For Luca, the pressure was suffocating. As one of the most famous actors in the world, his every move was scrutinized. His public image was carefully crafted by his management, his fans, and most notably, by his mother, Victoria Sinclair, a legendary actress in her own right. Victoria had been the queen of the silver screen for decades, and her influence over her son's life was absolute. When Luca first told her about Elliot, her reaction had been sharp, cutting, and cold. "He's not your type," she had said dismissively. "He's not even in your league, Luca. You can't afford to be seen with someone like him." Victoria wasn't concerned about Elliot's talents, his potential, or his future. She was concerned with his social standing, or lack thereof. To her, Luca's love life was a business transaction, an extension of his public image. And Elliot, with his modest beginnings and lack of status in the industry, was a threat to everything she had worked so hard to build for her son. The tension between Luca and his mother was palpable. Every time they spoke, there was an underlying feeling of discomfort, a reminder that Luca's every decision had been scrutinized and controlled for most of his life. But Luca, for the first time, felt a pull towards something real, something that wasn't dictated by the industry or his mother's endless demands. Elliot represented freedom. Freedom from the expectations of others, freedom from the prison his fame had built around him. But as much as Luca wanted to protect Elliot, he knew the cost of that protection would be high. His mother and his management team had already made it clear: if Luca continued seeing Elliot, his career would suffer. It wasn't just idle threat either. The industry had no place for scandals, especially not the kind of scandal that involved a famous star like Luca having a relationship with someone considered beneath him. There were countless opportunities for his career to be ruined. Brands would drop him, endorsements would disappear, and the media would tear him apart. The public could be cruel, especially when it came to a romance that didn't fit the carefully curated image of a perfect movie star. And for Elliot, things weren't much better. His management company, sensing the brewing storm, also stepped in. The whispers behind closed doors were loud and clear. End this relationship. Cut ties with Luca before it ruins you. Elliot had always been the quiet, compliant one, but now his own career was on the line. The pressure was too much to bear, and he found himself at a crossroads. Every decision felt like it came with a price. If he stayed with Luca, his future in the industry would be uncertain at best. If he walked away, would he be able to live with himself? After days of agonizing over the decision, Elliot made the hardest choice of his life. He pulled away. He stopped responding to Luca's calls and messages, keeping his distance in the hopes of protecting them both. He didn't want to hurt Luca's career, and he didn't want to be the cause of any more media frenzy. Elliot didn't want to be a footnote in Luca's story. He convinced himself that it was the right decision, that it was for the best. But deep down, he knew it was a lie. Weeks passed, and the silence between them grew unbearable. The absence of Luca's voice in his life was a constant ache in Elliot's chest, but it was a pain he chose to endure. Meanwhile, Luca was left in the cold, trapped between his desire for Elliot and the suffocating expectations placed on him. But Luca was not the type to sit idly by when it came to something he wanted. He had spent too many years living for others, too many years being molded into the perfect image the world expected him to be. One night, the industry's glittering social calendar called, and Elliot found himself at another party, a typical industry event, filled with beautiful faces, champagne, and fake smiles. He hadn't expected Luca to be there, but when he entered the room, everything else faded into the background. Luca was standing near the bar, laughing with a few colleagues, but when their eyes met, time seemed to slow down. For a brief moment, it felt like nothing had changed. That feeling, the connection, was still there. just as strong as it had ever been. Elliot's heart hammered in his chest, and before he knew it, he was walking towards Luca, unable to stop himself. The moment felt inevitable. Luca turned toward him, his eyes softening when he saw Elliot. His expression changed, the tension between them palpable. In that moment, Luca made a decision. He didn't care anymore. He couldn't hide the truth any longer. With the media watching, Luca grabbed the microphone from the event's host, his voice filling the room. "I love Elliot Harper," Luca declared, his voice firm and steady. "And I don't regret it. Love is not something anyone can control. I don't care about the consequences. I don't care about my career or anyone's expectations. I love him, and that's the only thing that matters." The room fell into stunned silence. The cameras flashed, and the reporters rushed to capture the moment, their microphones poised to catch every word. Elliot froze. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Luca Sinclair, the star who had always played by the rules, the actor who had built an empire on his carefully managed image, had just thrown it all away for him. But there was no going back now. The media frenzy was immediate. Within hours, the news had spread across every outlet. The story was everywhere. Luca Sinclair comes out with new lover. Who is Elliot Harper? The questions were endless, the speculation unrelenting. Elliot's phone was flooded with messages. His management team was furious, telling him he needed to distance himself from Luca before the fallout could cause any further damage. But it was too late. Luca was being painted as reckless, irresponsible, and defiant. His career was hanging by a thread, and Elliot's life was being dragged into the chaos. They had both known the risks, but neither had anticipated the speed at which everything would spiral out of control. Despite the storm of negative press, there was something undeniably freeing about what Luca had done. He had made his choice. He had chosen Elliot, not for the public's approval, but because he could no longer live a lie. And Elliot, despite everything, found himself unable to turn away. For the first time in his life, he felt seen, not as a background actor, not as a nobody, but as someone worthy of being loved. They had no idea what would happen next. The media would continue to chase them. The industry would continue to judge them, and their careers would continue to hang in the balance. But for the first time, they were no longer hiding. As the night wore on, Elliot and Luca found themselves alone in a quiet corner of the party, away from the flashing lights and prying eyes. It felt like the world had stopped for a moment, and for the first time in weeks, they were just two people. No cameras, no pressure, no expectations. Luca took Elliot's hand, his thumb brushing gently against his skin. "I know this won't be easy," Luca said, his voice low, but there was a certainty in it. "But I don't care. I want you. And I'll do whatever it takes to make this work." Elliot looked into Luca's eyes and knew for the first time that the decision they had made was the right one. No matter the cost, no matter the consequences, they had chosen each other. And that was enough. Part 3. The Struggle Within. The camera flashed as Luca stepped out of the hotel, a rush of reporters clamoring for his attention. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, the buzzing tension in the air thick enough to cut through with a knife. The words they shouted were sharp, biting. "Is it true, Luca? Is he the one? Or are you just playing with him?" His world had come crashing down in a matter of hours. Luca Sinclair, once the golden boy of Hollywood, had never imagined that one wrong step, one public mistake, would lead to this. The rumor mill was a powerful force, one he had been fortunate enough to avoid for years. But now, he was the center of it. His image was no longer that of a perfect, untouchable star. Instead, he had become the face of scandal. It had all started with a misunderstanding, one carefully orchestrated by his management to protect him from the backlash of his relationship with Elliot. The public needed to see that Luca was still available, that he could still fit into the image they had come to love, the heartthrob, the unattainable idol. But things went too far. Too much was at stake. The photographs that had been taken from a casual meeting between Luca and a colleague at a hotel were twisted into something more. The headline screamed, "Luca Sinclair caught with another man. Is he playing with Elliot Harper?" The truth was, Luca had been talking to a friend about work, but the way the tabloids spun it, it looked like he was cheating on Elliot. And that was just the beginning. The cost of fame. Elliot watched as the storm raged from the safety of his apartment. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends, family, and most painfully his manager. The questions, the accusations, the disbelief, it was overwhelming. In every article, every headline, he saw his name dragged through the mud. It wasn't just about Luca anymore. It was about them both. Elliot was no stranger to hardship. He'd spent his entire career in the shadows, never quite good enough, never quite fitting in. But this was different. The judgment was not just from strangers on the internet or the occasional negative review. It was personal. The constant barrage of gossip was suffocating, and it wasn't just the public that was turning on them. Luca's team was urging him to pull back from Elliot, and Elliot's own management was giving him ultimatums. Contracts were being threatened, sponsorship deals evaporated, and Elliot found himself becoming a symbol of the scandal rather than the aspiring actor he had always dreamed of being. It was as if everything they had worked for, their careers, their privacy, their love, was slipping through their fingers. The pressure was unbearable. Every time Elliot looked in the mirror, he saw a different person, someone who had been tainted by the very thing he had once longed for, the spotlight. Luca too was crumbling. The weight of his fame, the expectations placed on him by the world, felt like a crushing burden. He was no longer the man who could walk freely in the streets or laugh off the negative press. Now, he was a prisoner to his own image. The most difficult part wasn't the media. It was the reality of losing Elliot, the person who had made him feel more than just the famous actor, the person who had loved him for who he truly was, not the man they all saw on TV. And yet, because of his own foolishness, he had risked losing everything. A heartbreaking decision days passed in a blur of whispered conversations and countless media appearances. Luca's publicist called him in for a meeting one morning. "Luca, this isn't sustainable," his publicist said, her voice cold and sharp. "We need to clean up this mess. You need to distance yourself from Elliot for a while. Let the heat die down." Luca felt his chest tighten. Every fiber of his being screamed in protest. But he had been here before, always at the mercy of his management team, always told what to do, how to act. His career depended on his image, and right now, his image was in free fall. "I can't do that," Luca replied, his voice quiet but firm. "I love him." His manager didn't respond right away, but her silence was louder than any words. Finally, she spoke. "You're making this difficult, Luca. You need to choose your career or your relationship with him. You can't have both." Luca's heart sank as the choice seemed to stretch out before him, impossibly wide and dark. He couldn't choose between Elliot and his career. It wasn't a decision he could make. But for Elliot, the choice seemed clearer. One night in the silence of his apartment, Elliot made the decision that would haunt him for days. He had to break up with Luca. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about what he wanted. It was about survival. His survival in a world that seemed bent on tearing him apart. Elliot sent a message to Luca, one he never wanted to send. "We can't do this anymore. It's too much. I'm not strong enough to keep fighting this battle. I don't want to be the reason your career falls apart. It's over." The message felt final, crushing, but he knew it had to be done, and the quiet of separation. The moment Luca received the message, his heart shattered. He had expected the pressure to come from the outside, He had expected the world to judge him, but he had never imagined that Elliot, the one person who had made him feel whole, would walk away. For the first time, Luca felt completely alone. He tried calling, sending messages, but Elliot was silent. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm inside Luca's chest. He knew he had made mistakes, and now they were too great to fix. But he couldn't give up on the one person who had given him a chance at something real. Luca refused to let go. He couldn't. Desperation and hope Luca's heartache drove him to desperation. He couldn't live with the idea of losing Elliot, but he also knew he couldn't just apologize and expect things to go back to normal. This wasn't something that could be solved with words alone. And so, Luca did what he knew best. He took action. He flew to a quiet town, far from the media storm. He rented a small cabin and sat down to write. This wasn't a message. It was a declaration. He knew that no one could save him but himself. He wasn't going to let his career or the world define his future. He wasn't going to lose Elliot. When he finally returned to the city, he showed up at Elliot's apartment unannounced. There, standing in front of the door, he was no longer the famous actor, the man everyone expected him to be. He was just Luca, the man who loved Elliot, the man who was willing to fight for him, no matter what. Elliot opened the door to find Luca standing there, his face pale, his eyes desperate. Luca didn't wait for Elliot to speak. He stepped forward, his voice trembling but steady. "I know you're hurting," Luca said softly, "but I can't lose you. I don't care what the world says, and I don't care what anyone else thinks. I need you. I've lost everything else, but I won't lose you too." The raw honesty in Luca's words struck Elliot like a punch to the gut. He wanted to run, to escape the weight of it all, but he couldn't. "I can't just pretend nothing happened," Elliot whispered. "I can't pretend that everything is okay when it's not." "I don't want to pretend," Luca replied, his voice steady now. "I just want a chance to make things right. I've been playing the game my whole life, but I can't keep playing it anymore. Not with you." The room fell silent. For the first time, Elliot could see the man behind the headlines, the man who had been just as vulnerable as he was. And in that moment, Elliot realized that perhaps love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about avoiding mistakes or avoiding the pain. It was about facing it together. Elliot took a deep breath, his heart racing. He didn't know what the future would hold, but he knew that he wasn't ready to give up on them, not yet. And so, with one simple gesture, they took the first step toward rebuilding what they had lost. Part 4. Touching Happiness. It had been months since Luca and Elliot had decided to face the consequences of their love, and the weight of the world no longer seemed as heavy. Their journey had been anything but easy, but in the midst of chaos they had found something more powerful than fame, the strength to chase their own happiness. Luca was no longer the star who hid behind his image. The pressures of the industry had forced him into a cage, but now he was free. He had joined an independent film project, a daring move for someone of his caliber. But it was exactly what he needed. For the first time, Luca wasn't working for the company's image or his mother's approval. He was working for himself, taking a role that challenged his acting and allowed him to express the real emotions he had hidden for so long. In the meantime, Elliot's career was rising as well. The shadow of being a background actor had finally started to lift. He had fought for every opportunity, taken every chance that came his way, and now he was beginning to carve out his place in the industry. It wasn't the fame he once dreamed of, but it was enough. It was more than enough. Elliot had his own moment to shine. Their lives, both professionally and personally, seemed to be on an upward trajectory. The love they had once hidden in secret had now become a quiet symbol of defiance. But in the world of entertainment, nothing good ever came without a price. The final test. Just when things were finally starting to feel normal again, a familiar, menacing figure from Luca's past reappeared. His mother, Victoria Sinclair. Victoria had always controlled Luca's life, and she wasn't about to let go of that power, even if it meant destroying his happiness. She had watched the press and saw how Luca and Elliot were gaining not just media attention, but also public admiration. She couldn't stand it. In her eyes, Elliot was still a threat to the family's legacy, a reminder that Luca had dared to choose something real over the perfect image she had spent a lifetime building for him. Victoria was calculating, and she knew exactly how to play her cards. One evening, she made a call to Luca. Her voice was calm, as always, but there was an edge to it he had come to fear over the years. "Luca, I've been watching you," Victoria said, her words sharp. "You're playing with fire. If you continue down this path with Elliot, I'll make sure your career and his is over before it even begins. Do you really think the world will accept someone like him? You've already ruined everything with your public antics, but I will make sure you have nothing left to lose if you don't come back to me. If you want to keep the career and legacy I built for you, you'll leave him." Luca felt the weight of his mother's words crash over him. For years he had followed her every command. His career, his relationships, even his happiness were all dictated by her. But this time, he knew he couldn't choose her over Elliot again. He stared at the phone, his hand trembling. He wanted to yell, to argue, to tell her that he had made his own choices, but he didn't. Because deep down, he had already made a decision. He would not allow his mother to control him anymore. The next day, Luca made his choice. He didn't go to the meeting with his mother. Instead, he went to Elliot. The moment of truth. Elliot had been working late when Luca arrived, his eyes darkened with exhaustion and determination. When Luca stepped through the door, the look in his eyes told Elliot everything he needed to know. "Luca, what happened?" Elliot asked, concerned by the quiet intensity in his voice. Luca walked over to him, his steps deliberate. He reached out and took Elliot's hands in his voice trembling with sincerity. "I've been living my life for everyone else, my career, my mother, the expectations of the world. But Elliot, I'm done with that," Luca said, his voice filled with emotion. "I can't keep pretending anymore. I can't live for my mother or anyone else. I need to live for me. I choose you." Elliot's heart skipped a beat. After everything, Luca had made a choice. The same man who had once seemed so unreachable, so distant, was finally standing in front of him, offering everything. "I love you, Elliot," Luca continued, "and no matter what happens, I won't let you go. You've always been the one I've been looking for, even when I couldn't admit it. I'm choosing you, no matter the cost." The room was silent for a long moment. Elliot had been waiting for this moment too, the moment when the choice between career and love wouldn't be a choice at all. And here it was. "I love you too," Elliot whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "And I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in their lives, they had chosen each other, without hesitation, without fear, facing the storm together. The battle, however, was far from over. Victoria Sinclair didn't take rejection lightly. She had been the queen of the entertainment world for decades, and she wasn't about to let her son throw it all away for a man she considered unworthy. She escalated the fight. Articles came out daily, more vicious than before. Luca and Elliot were branded as reckless, delusional, and selfish. The media painted them as villains, the public as critics, and the industry watched with bated breath to see who would win. The old guard of entertainment, or the new generation who refused to be controlled. But Luca and Elliot didn't back down. They didn't hide. They continued to fight, both for their love and their careers. Together, they appeared at public events, supporting each other through the storm. Their first joint appearance at a major film festival was nothing short of historic. Luca, once a symbol of unattainable perfection, stood proudly beside Elliot, who was now on the cusp of becoming a star in his own right. Their relationship became a symbol of resilience. It wasn't just about love. It was about refusing to bow to the pressures of an industry that demanded conformity. Luca's independent film project was released to rave reviews, proving to the world that he was more than just a pretty face. He was an artist, a man who could stand up for what he believed in. Elliot, too, was finally receiving the recognition he deserved. His breakthrough role in a drama series captivated audiences, showcasing his talent and proving that he was not just a background actor anymore. He had become an icon in his own right, a love that endures. The day came when Luca and Elliot stood hand in hand, ready to premiere their first film together. It was more than a film. It was a declaration. They had faced the worst the industry could throw at them, and yet they had come out stronger, unbroken, and more in love than ever. As the credits rolled and the audience erupted into applause, Luca turned to Elliot, his eyes shining. "We did it," Luca said softly, as if the moment were too big for words. Elliot smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "No, you did it. We did it together." Their love had weathered every storm. It had survived the doubts, the rumors, and the betrayals. And now, in front of the world, they were free to finally live their truth. They had chosen each other, and now they would live their love. A love that wasn't just for the movies. It was their reality, their story, one they would write together forever. The final step. Luca and Elliot's journey had only just begun. With the love they had for each other and the strength to face any challenge, they had rewritten their own narrative. They had become more than just lovers. They had become partners in every sense of the word. They were no longer afraid of the world. Together they were unstoppable. And as they walked off the stage hand in hand, they knew one thing for sure. Their love would never be a story confined to the screen. It was real. It was theirs. And it would last forever.